talking to Jacqueline Zimmerman out in California.
Good morning, John.
How you doing?
Very good.
Okay. We're talking with Sales Talk today, and I'm talking to Jacqueline Zimmerman, who's a consultant, a paid consultant, consultant for hire, and is an expert, recognized expert in ACT. And we're going to get into this. This tape and this particular interview is primarily for people who do not have ACT, but would like to increase their referral business, really don't know how to go about it in an efficient manner. And, of course, we have the ticket and we have the answers. Those of you that do have ACT that are kind of just starting out and use it minimally, you would be interested in listening to this too. And for those of you that are more advanced, we'll be following this up. There's another interview that will be available for intermediate users that will go into this in a little more detail. But obviously, we have to start somewhere. And before we even start that, though, our listeners always like to know about people's backgrounds and where they came from, and in your case, maybe a little personal background, but also your credentials too. I do know, don't know a lot about you. I do know you're one of the few recognized experts in ACT. Most people out there would not know that to become an expert in ACT is actually pretty rigorous, and there probably less than 50 of you in the country, if memory serves me correct. So anyway, why don't we just kind of turn this over to you for a little bit and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Actually, it is a very rigorous program. It's very rewarding, and we do spend a lot of time with the product vendor. When I began, it was Symantec, and now it subsequently was sold to Sales Logic, and now that company is called Interact Commerce, who sells the product ACT 2000. And what it requires is that we actually, there are several of us worldwide. You're right, at any given time there's probably over 100 of us in the world, and this is an international product. ACT is a super big deal because it captured about 75 to 80% of the contact management market. By comparison, Goldmine captures about 8% of the market. So there's a huge difference. And with our training, most of the time we are flying up. Eugene, Oregon was the site until last year, and now it's Scottsdale, Arizona. So we work directly with the techs for 3 or 4 days and then return. And in fact, our convention that comes up is actually 4 solid days of training. We sit in 6 classes a day, and we just have ongoing training at night. We have our own news group that's international that the public's not exposed to, but it's a chance for all of us to kind of regroup and discuss what's going on with the product ACT.
Mm-hmm. And I also know that you've been doing this for a number of years, and you do have some experience in working in the mortgage arena, too, that will prove helpful, not so much when we're talking in this first stage, but certainly in the second stage. But I would like to start with perhaps a little talk by myself on kind of just what we're looking to achieve here, and for those listeners, what is the purpose of this particular version of Sales Talk. And I would have to say that what Jacqueline and I are going to discuss today, primarily Jacqueline, of course, being the expert, are the advantages of using a contact management program. In particular, ACT, the reason is because it is the best and it's the most widely used. And for those reasons, and it's also relatively inexpensive, Jacqueline, as you know, for less than $200, you can pick up a copy of this, and in our business that equates to about a fifth of a commission on one deal for people. And so it's a very inexpensive program to set up. But I would like to just kind of introduce this subject by kind of going to the end point and why we're talking about it. And the reason we're talking about it today and why I think it's such an important program is the fact that for loan officers out there, business is really kind of divided into 4 areas, and they're very distinct areas. but they all come together in one final area, and that, of course, is the primary ones are dealing with realtors, and then you have another group that we could lump together as affinity-type groups, and then we have builders. When we're talking about affinity groups, we're talking about dealing with attorneys or CPAs or financial planners. But at some point in the process, you develop a client, and hopefully it's based on a good relationship. And the thing that becomes so important in the whole equation is that as you build your business up, from starting off, an increasing amount of your business potentially can come from referrals. Referrals in our business are the epitome of a good client, and the reason that referrals are so good is because primarily they're referred to you, so it does not have a competitive aspect to it for the most part. Even more importantly is that referrals are not as price sensitive as someone that might come either direct from a mailing or from a realtor or whatever. They are, in many cases, they're not price sensitive at all. They're program sensitive and service level sensitive. And because of that, people who've been in the business a long time, and by that I mean 5 or 6 years, can build up potentially a referral base that can, on average, deliver between 35 and, in some rare cases, Dave Casano from Chase happens to be one of those rare examples, that can deliver as much as 60% of your business. That's an extraordinary amount because if worked correctly, a referral business is kind of found business in the sense that it's not that expensive to bring in the front door, and it's also very profitable. But of course, Jacqueline, as you and I know, and it's the subject of our talk today, you are not able to do this unless you have a good contact management program. For those of you out there that are doing 10 to 20 million a year and would like to jump it up into the 30 or 40 million dollar range, and those of you in that range that would like to jump it beyond, it is virtually, and I would say almost impossible to do it without a good contact management program. And to have a good contact management program, you have to kind of start somewhere, and that's the purpose of this. Those listening today will be people who do not have ACT but would like to, listen about the benefits of it, and those that may have it that are really just kind of tinkering with it. They don't really use it for too much, and that's our audience today. So, Jacqueline, I think I've kind of set the stage, and I wondered if you would start off by talking in a very basic fashion how someone would go out and purchase it and set it up, and perhaps we could start by talking about the two main pages in ACT, and of course that's the one that has contacts and the contact list.
Terrific. Yeah, for someone who's not already using some type of software, ACT is really extraordinary because it's so user-friendly. It's considered the most user-friendly. Perhaps that's why it's so popular.
Mm-hmm. Could you speak up just a little bit?
Certainly.
Great.
It's really exciting for the new user, someone who has not been subsequently or currently using an electronic, some type of software. ACT really acts as if it's a electronic Rolodex and an electronic day timer. So for the first time, you can keep really a consolidated listing and consolidated set of data, keep all of your information under one roof, so to speak. And for the new user, ACT is very friendly out of the box. It is as much as just going out and buying the product, which is not very expensive. It is usually under $200. And as much as just installing the product, that's pretty user-friendly as well on any system that has Windows 95, 98, or Windows NT, or probably the new Windows 2000 Millennium version if anyone has that. With regard to setting it up, Act First does set up by using its own Act demo, which gives the new user a chance to just browse what data would look like once they start entering their own and have different choices and set up features. Just the Act demo is a great place just to take a little peek and kind of navigate through that.
So you would recommend that new users, before they even start entering data, do the demo?
I really would. I really would go into that, just because in one way, there's no liability. You can go in and start clicking on all the buttons, have a look around at the different views of ACT, which are 8. The two that are most interesting that you already spoke of, and that I would definitely look at, is that ACT comes up in a one-contact view, where one person, actually when you boot up and go into ACT, you're looking at your own records. So in case there are other people who also get to log on your database, and that is not always the case, but if there were, your secretary, perhaps someone else, you would log in as yourself, and you would see your record with the exact type of data, the template that you're going to be using for all the records. The second view that you spoke of is the contact list view. It is actually my favorite view. It is a mini Excel spreadsheet of sorts, and it gives a list of all the contacts. If you have 80, 800, 8,000, you can actually go to that view. The sort capability is fantastic. It's really a fun playground to be looking at data in a variety of different ways for a variety of different reasons. So that's a place that you'll be drawn back to again and again for performing different types of functions or even lookups.
Well, the first one that I think is the important one is going to be the contacts, and that screen is basic. It really contains the very basics that a loan officer would put in, and that is, and we're talking about primarily prospects here, but of course, as you know, we have the ability to separate this into groups and to put designations on the type of client that you have. But you can start off with a company name, and then under that you have the contact name, a title, department, if there's a department, phone, and then an extension, and then a fax. And then after that, a salutation. When you do your letters, that's generated automatically. And then we have an ID status. What exactly is the ID status, that field?
ID status is a great way of tagging the different people who are in your life. And when I say that, I mean that most ACT users ultimately fall in love with the product, and they want to put everything in their life, because the greatest appeal of ACT has really been the calendaring. That really is, the new user will really fall in love with the product when they really become very, very accomplished with calendaring, which does not really require a lot of effort, but they'll really enjoy that feature. And when you do that, the different people that you enter, quote, or people in your life, would be CPAs. They would be financial planners. They would be attorneys. They would be prospects. They might be cold prospects. They may be prospects who have been referred, etc. And so they can be differentiated by the way they are tagged in ID status. Mm-hmm. There's also can be added different fields that will subsequently categorize further what type of CPA or what type of XYZ referral, what type of person that really is for us. And so when you're entering people in, you do have with ACT the possibility of also entering in private data, which does seem to worry new users once in a while, that they think that both their business contacts and their private personal contacts can't fit under one roof. And what's beautiful about ACT is that that's very practical, and it was made to do just that. But by tagging each record and always filling out the ID status, it makes it very elegant and easy to quickly grab that particular group when you do want to ship out a mailer.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Well, as you mentioned, we're talking, totally about ID status and the ability to distinguish among different groups. And would you explain exactly, how that's done, which is kind of an edit function?
Oh, with regard to
with ID
things you can do when you get your ACT database.
No, I'm talking about the ID status, how you can put your own categories. If you were doing business just with doctors, you can actually type in a category of doctors that
exactly
you'll be able to sort on later.
The database, the actual ACT program does come with a specific database structure that includes 77 fields. But what's interesting is right away you can do such minor editing that, John, you're speaking of, is that you can go straight to any field that does have a natural drop-down. And ID status is one of them. But when you look at that drop-down, it may not perfectly fit or be tailored for the application you're using, for the people that, the people that will be living in your database. You'll be populating your database with a variety of different types of individuals, builders, realtors, CPAs, prospects, clients, etc., even personal friends and family. So if that's the case, you do want to actually take advantage of the very simplistic editing features of ACT, which is you can go into any field, and by either just hitting the drop-down or hitting F2, you can go in and edit that list. So it does not hurt the database in any way, and also does not hurt data that's already in there, but you get the chance then to tailor specifically to what sorts of groups or types of people are going to live inside your data.
Give me an example that would relate to the mortgage industry. Are you saying that you could, for example, tag just realtors or just builders? Or
those won't appear on the list with ACT straight out of the box when you bring it home.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Those are going to appear there, of course. So, yes, you're going to go straight in and look at maybe the 12 to 15 that are already there, the presets of ACT, and by pushing F2 or just going into that drop-down any way you can go in and you'll see all the features to add, modify, delete, and take out the ones that mean nothing to you. If vendor means nothing to you, then it should not be there. You can simply take it out, and it really is that easy. To add the list that you prefer to see, sometimes people have cold calls. Sometimes people have cold prospects, warm prospects, hot prospects, clients, realtors, builders, attorneys, financial planners, and so forth. So whatever type of people you want to be entering data on into ACT, you would want their, quote, ID status. What are they to you? You want that listed. And we're talking specifically here for our listeners who are not familiar, most of them, with that. We're talking about a specific field that exists in the front page of the contact itself, where you're going to enter the name and address and right. Email address and stuff. That is one specific field that we're talking about, and obviously the value added here is just how easy that is to do. It really is. And ACT will always open up to the main view, so you'll always be right in front of that view, and it will list all the fields demographically, address, phone numbers, fax, like you said. ID status is right in the middle. And I think we also have to add, too, here, and this is my old IBM computer stuff going in, and that is garbage in, garbage out. If you do not set this up properly, you're not going to have something that you can work with. And this is certainly, I think you'd agree, one of the most important fields. It's really exciting because many of my clients, we actually do sit down when they do buy the product, and we do sit down and we do have an opportunity or a chance to, at the get-go, before they roll it out to their people or even just to themselves, have a chance at this point to really set up fields. Maybe there are fields in ACT that don't exist yet. And this is a great time to kind of get a wish list of what type of data are you capturing on people, what information is very important for tracking. Yes, and I think here I'd like to put a little plug in for you because I think when people get this, that once it is set up and they're ready to put this in, that it might be worth a paid call to you to sit down and go over this with them briefly and talk about the fields and stuff, so they at least start off on the right footing. And I know you do have experience in the mortgage field, and you know a lot of the lingo and realtor, builder, et cetera, like that, CPAs. Yeah, I'm an ACT expert first, but yeah, I have focused on several different domains, industries that ACT is really being widely used, and the mortgage industry is definitely one of them. And people really are really excited by the fact that we can customize and tailor it so it really does reflect the meaningful data that they want to capture.
But I think I'd like to stop you there too, and point out, hopefully with your concurrence, that there's different levels of customization. Those of you that are out there shouldn't be scared off when you start talking about customization. You're not talking $4,000 or $5,000 here, except at the really higher levels.
Not at all.
You're talking about being able to customize simply so that you can get started and get the correct data into the database. This should not be something that should scare anybody. And wouldn't you agree that, even if you're reasonably computer illiterate, that this is a program that you can make work for you, even on a minimal level?
You really can, and just with the most minor tailoring to the product. And usually when I'm working with a client, depending on where they're located, we work together, and they're very fascinated by the flexibility of the product, and that it's very non-invasive. Sometimes within a few minutes or an hour, we really have something that they really enjoy and that really fits, even if it's just pulling fields to different parts of the screen, so that they're more accessible, that they're in the right place. Even just that minor cosmetic kind of, rearranging really adds a lot of value and benefit.
Right, and value is what this discussion is really all about, because loan officers are only going to be interested in a product like this if it can produce business for them, and this is one of the real no-brainers in the industry. This is a guarantee that it can produce business. The only issue is how much business it can produce, and that's going to depend a little bit on the sophistication of the product and how you use it. I had a very interesting conversation with someone from Bank of America, I believe it was, did an interview, and it was interesting. I was a little surprised, actually. He uses ACT, but not to generate the newsletters and mailings and things that I think are really important, and where you really start getting the value and and the power of it. And he uses it only, and this is a guy, I think he's doing 60 or 70 million a year, so he doesn't have to apologize to anybody. But he uses it really just to enter information in from anybody who calls, whoever. If he answers that phone, they're either in his database or going in, and he does not use it any other way. So that when people call, he automatically knows that as soon as they say Joe Williams calling, he's into Joe Williams and knows their kids' birthdays and has notes and where they live. And it sounds like, you probably don't remember me, Tom. Oh, yeah, I remember you. I know about 3 years ago we talked and you were looking at an arm and, and their jaws dropping. So he does not use it beyond that, but it's very, very effective for him.
Just for that alone, I think I fell in love with ACT, because I really was brought in for my technical expertise and my ability to troubleshoot and create data structures, etc. So all of that. But it is remarkable how all of us who use or work with ACT, support ACT, we actually fall in love with the product. And you're right, it becomes a no-brainer, and I like it that way, where it doesn't matter who I'm speaking with. That data is being entered in for the hopes that later it'll be of some use to me.
Right, exactly.
And if not, then I don't need to care about that. But if it is, it's perfect, easy access to information. Well,
I want to stay on focused on the basics, and there's only two things that I really want to cover here, and that is what is called the contact page, which is the page that you said comes up when the program boots up, and that is simply starts out with your name, that particular page, but it is of one user, as opposed to a list that we'll talk about in a minute. So moving along with that one contact, after you have ID status, you have the ability to put in a website address. And I think kind of the neat thing that I like about it is if you have somebody's web address, once you have it in, all you have to do is take your cursor and hit it, and it will immediately take you to the website.
Yeah, it makes the hand and goes straight to it.
Right.
The email, once email is set up, and that is more advanced.
Well, the email address is one of the default fields, too, of course, on that page. You skipped a couple fields ahead of me, but the next fields are address, city, state, and zip. But also correctly that you can also put their email address in. And I think the really neat thing, I use that feature all the time, where if I want to send somebody an email, all I do is click on it, and I happen to have Outlook, and it just immediately, a screen comes up. I type in my message, hit send, and it sends it right to Outlook and out through the computer, and then keeps a record of it.
Exactly. Just to clarify, in case people are wondering where Outlook comes into place, I know, John, when you're speaking of this, you're speaking of Outlook email specifically, and that does have a perfect integration with that.
Right, as well as other email programs. Am I right on that?
They're narrowing it down. It used to be Dora as well, but they're really narrowed it down. Symantec had a vested interest in working well with Microsoft, and they have a good relationship. So they did work on a perfect integration with all the Outlook products.
Mm-hmm. Now, there is what's called, that most people probably have on their computer, if they're using an email program, in terms of a browser, they're either using Netscape or Internet Explorer. But when it comes to an email program, most likely they're using Outlook or what's called Outlook Express, which is a little mini version of Outlook, not quite as powerful. But I think the point you want to make is that
both of those products perfectly integrate with the product of ACT 2000.
Mm-hmm. What else integrates with ACT? That's an email program.
I believe CC Mail.
Okay, which is a pretty big one.
Lotus Notes.
Okay.
Other than that, they did drop off. Like I said, they did get rid of the integration with Eudora. It was not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And so, subsequently in ACT 2000, they do remove that. But as well, the real advantage is that with people who have no real, who have no allegiance to the product, Outlook Express, etc., they can go straight into ACT. ACT really was designed to just bring in the email directly from what's called the incoming and the outgoing mail server for whatever service they have, whether if it's with TTE, PENet, Earthlink. America Online is the only email product that cannot be used with ACT.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, any product could be directly pulled into ACT without a go-between, without the middleman of Outlook Express, etc.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's important for especially the first-time listeners out there, that we go over that again, that you really should, if you're going to go out and get ACT, you should have a Microsoft program, an email program like Outlook or Outlook Express, if not something like CC Mail or Lotus. However, if you don't have that, and I really can't imagine people not either having it or wanting to have it, you can go directly to your ISP from which you enter into the Internet. And I believe what you're saying is you do not need one of those programs, although it certainly is much more advisable and beyond the scope of this interview.
It really yes, and it really has its place. And if people are already very much enjoying use of the product Outlook, then it's terrific for them. If they are not, it really is a no-brainer. It's very easy to integrate if you go straight to the ISP. So both are very convenient.
Right. And I think the point here, too, is that what we're both trying to say is that this should not scare you at all. This is very user-friendly. In fact, this is just a personal opinion. Of all the software programs I have that one would consider reasonably sophisticated, from Excel and Access and others, only Word, I think, can even come close in its simplicity to be able to literally take it out of a box and figure out what to do with not even an hour's reading. Would you agree with that? You don't even need an hour to get it up.
I would. People, usually about an hour of just browsing through ACT.
Right. And if you get the version 2, there's a couple ways to do it. A lot of the software programs now, you can just download, and then instead of having a manual, you go right into your help. I have never done that. I always recommend, I know it's worked for me, that you do it the long way. Go to a store, purchase the program where you can get the manual sent to you. Instead of getting it on a CD-ROM or whatever, so you can physically turn the pages. I found that very helpful for beginners.
Right, and if you don't get the book, you can always purchase it straight from the vendor. So if you do download, you still have the option of quickly buying.
Right, exactly. But I think it's something that both you and I would recommend for beginners. Even for more advanced people, it's helpful to have that. You know, it's always nice to have that visual.
Yeah, it's great to have the box. It's great to have the CD.
The next category that I want to talk about is last results. I do not use this category, but I can see. But then again, I'm not a loan originator. I thought maybe you might go over that and how that can prove useful.
Last results is an interesting field because when data is entered into it, it automatically sends a copy of whatever data gets entered straight to notes and histories and records the time and date that you entered that data. So from a kind of a practical sense, you're constantly, the person's going from this stage or that stage or this result to that result. Every time you speak or have some type of interaction with them, you can be tracking that. And I know we haven't spoken much of the lower tabs. When you go straight into ACT.
Well, I do want to. I just want to cover last results first, but I definitely do want to get into notes and history.
The last results, just to give you kind of a broad picture, half my clients use it and half of them do not. So it's really dependent on what you're hoping to get out of it. And many of the clients want to quickly have access to tracking something in the notes and histories. They are using last results. For that reason, also, they want a quick visual. When they go to the person's record, they don't have to browse through a million notes and histories. They can actually just look at that field and see what's most prominent. What just happened recently? With
give me some specific examples of what you'd put in there. A mortgage person.
A mortgage person may even start using last results, even track the whole process, not just of prospecting, but actually after they start integrating with escrow, with the underwriter, with the loan agent, the buying and selling agents, when they're starting to have interaction and actual activities with those people where they need to get certain forms in or certain correspondence back and forth, they're really tracking the whole stage of the process.
And that's where they do it.
That can happen right there.
Is that a sortable field?
It definitely is. And as with ACT, though, there are always three ways to do everything. So there is no right way. But that is definitely a powerful way where people have been tracking information. And the nice thing about that field is it generates the notes and histories every time it's touched.
Let's drop down, because the people who are new here don't understand what we're talking about when we talk about notes and histories. Why don't you explain what that is, because it's a tab on this screen towards the bottom that you would hit.
Yes, ACT comes out. One of the reasons ACT is probably preferred over Outlook is because it's extraordinary in that it has these lower tabs, these features where you can actually collect more data, but along the bottom. That top part is pretty much your Tokyo prime real estate as far as it always being there. That top half of the screen, the demographic address and so forth, ID status, that's always on top. And along the bottom, you have a series of tabs. The ones that are always there that you can't customize out are the notes and history, the activities, groups, and now in ACT 2000, the sales opportunity tab. Now those four tabs always are there for each record and each contact that you enter in your database.
Let's talk because we have a limited amount of time here. Let's just talk about notes and histories, what you would put in there.
Notes and histories, exactly. Notes and histories are a collection of, if I'm faxing, it'll be listed there. If I'm printing out a letter, it will be listed there for that person. If I'm making phone calls, I can add details about what the call was about. Actually received. Did I leave a message? Was it just attempted? I got busy. What is the content of the call? Did I meet with the person? Was the meeting held or not held? Did they have a sick child, etc.? To-dos. Did I research something for someone? Did I fax them out this? All that is listed. It's in a composite. It's a chronology of what has happened with that person.
And some of it, as you correctly pointed out, generates itself based on an action you do, like writing a letter. If I write a letter through this program and send the letter out, if I want to regurgitate the contents of that letter, am I able just to click on it and it'll bring the letter back up?
The nice feature of, yes, exactly, those notes and histories, is there's a sidebar. It's just a little skinny, the most farthest left portion. And those are actually shortcuts where you can revert back to documents. If the document gets saved, you can revert back to it just by double-clicking. An act will invoke Excel, Word, even your email, whatever application is appropriate for looking at that particular document. That'll be opened at the same time. And this makes it especially handy. One of the things with today's environment with email, we are constantly emailing others and receiving email. And it's a very big part of our day in the way we do business and the way we just correspond with others. And with apps, the notes and history area actually can be a dumping ground of all those emails. So 2 weeks from now, you can go back, double-click, as you said, in the notes and histories, and poof, that email will be right in front of you for good reading. Now, this could either be emails that you send out or ones that are sent to you. Faxes, letters. So again, anything that you're doing with that particular person. John Smith, whatever you're doing with John Smith would all be listed under the notes and history section.
I think we should point out here this particular conversation on this particular page context. We're talking about one individual. In my database, I have I think 729 individuals, and the value added here, of course, is I can no more remember everything about those 700 people and all the emails I sent or letters or writing down their kid's name as Billy and Joe than the man on the moon.
Even the next day.
That's right, exactly. Even within a day, and of course, loan officers, of course, can totally relate to what you and I are talking about now, because they run a kind of a madness parade during the day too, with realtors and builders calling and clients calling and setting up appointments. Once a month is done, they've settled their stuff. It's almost like they, I have a mental enema, and everything goes out, and they can't remember who they talked to last month. But we need a way to do that, and
that's really the beauty of ACT, is that you don't need to remember, because you're constantly filling the notes and histories, and with anything that's said, done, written, faxed, emailed, you're constantly filling those notes and histories. So you don't have to decide whether something's important. When it's important, it will be there, and you'll be able to read it, see it. And that's all that's going to be really important to you.
With the click of a mouse. And I think that's the important thing, that you can, when someone calls in, it's no fun trying to remember somebody's, their wife's name. But with something like this, you have that instantly in front of you. When you're talking to them, and maybe you haven't talked to them in a year or two or whatever, they're calling off a mailing or something that you sent out, you can immediately pull up the data. And the key is, it can be specific. You can get it right away.
When you're talking, John, I was thinking of mental freedoms, what most of my clients feel. They don't have to remember. There's no more pressure.
Exactly.
It really just takes care of itself.
And that brings that's funny. I'm glad you brought that up, because I never would have thought of it. But you're right. That's a quality of life issue, isn't it? It makes your life easier.
It definitely is. Spend more time with things that are most important.
Right, exactly. I think there are a couple other buttons that I would like to talk about. One that I use is that at the bottom of the screen is the phone/home, where you can hit a button, and now instead of just having their business address, you can enter their home address, their home phone numbers, their mobile number, their pager number, all this really kind of neat stuff. I like that one.
That's a terrific one. And one of the things clients request, and when they do retain me right away, is they would want immediately some of those fields to just appear on the front page, just because you do like to have a whole coherent set of all those phone numbers. But the tab you speak of, home phone, does have a full set of an extra address for that person. And often at the time, especially with loan officers, they're going to have at least 2 addresses for one person. And sometimes it's going to be a mailing, and it's going to be a property, or there's going to be another one.
Right, exactly.
Their former home.
Yeah, right.
It's completely customizable to cope with all of that.
Yeah, and I think having things like a pager number and a mobile number, everybody's got 3 or 4 numbers today. I mean, there's no way you can remember. I can't remember my wife's. She's got a couple different numbers, and every once in a while I got to go to the thing to kind of remember it.
Exactly.
There's one other field that I would like to cover in this beginning stage, and then I think we'll end the interview here, and that's alternate contacts. I wondered if you would maybe discuss, if you hit that button, what you can get. Because as you know, when you call an office, sometimes you can't get to the big cheese. You need to talk to a secretary, and she has a number, and she has a name, and things like that. So would you cover that field?
Yes, and that's really what it's for. It is for when you don't get to speak specifically to the person that you're focusing on. Who are the support people? Who are the people that you do speak to, and you do want to know their names? Now, you don't actually enter them as a new contact in the database because they're not someone you're faxing to. They're not someone you're emailing in specific. But a great place to go, and everyone, almost everyone using ACT is using that particular tab, where you do have up to 3 different, the assistant, the second contact, the third contact, and they come complete with their specific phone numbers, if that's the case, and titles. So you can kind of even leave a little message as to who they are to the given person you are trying to reach.
Mm-hmm.
Are they related? And then you're very clever on the phone when you just look up and you know it's Susie.
Right, exactly.
You know it's Martin. And suddenly, you kind of have a rapport straight from the get-go. Helps you get your calls back from the person you really are trying to speak with.
Well, I could not have made the point better. And as we have talked about many times in our interviews, you brought it up using different words, but it comes to the same thing. In our business, the mortgage business, ours is a relationship business. You cannot succeed in this business. You cannot advance in this business. You have no hope in this business unless you're creating a relationship. And what you and I have been talking about today is nothing more, when you bottom line it, than the ability to enhance your ability to create a relationship and maintain that relationship.
And have fun with it at the same time.
Well, exactly, and bring quality of life, and I'm glad you brought that up again. And I think on that point, we obviously didn't get to talk about the contact list within this period of time. I think what we'll do is that we'll put it into the next intermediate stage of our interview. And so those of you that are listening to us and that would like to go into another and more advanced aspect of it, and even then, it's not that much more advanced. Just simply go to the intermediate class now. And I want to thank you very much, Jacqueline. On the web page, you all will see how you can get hold of Jacqueline by phone or by email. She is a paid consultant. She's very good at what she does. And when you look at the cost of the services that she provides and the value and the return that you get, one deal gets a lot of stuff done. So it's very worthwhile. And I want to thank you, Jacqueline, and we'll talk to you later.
You're very welcome.
Okay.